go. Come on. Okay, sit. Sit. In the cup. In the cup. Good. Good. He never drove in a straight line. It's just like always all over the place. And he mugs constantly. Oh, this was funny. He said, okay, Lance can drive it. But then Lance drove away and Aaron couldn't catch up with the car. And then he changed from this like, oh yeah, you can share this with me, to get out of there, you son of a bitch. Oh, he was so mad. I put on taillights and headlights. Look how young I am. I can't get, oh my goodness, where'd he go? My mother and father separated when I was 2. And it was a very emotional time. My mother couldn't even sleep lying down. She had to sit up to go to sleep, I was told later. So I was shipped off to another family to live until I was, I guess, about 6 or so. And the family that I lived with were very religious. And they kept telling me that my mother and my father, because they were, I guess because they were divorced or because they were seeing other people, that they were going to fry in hell. And that hell was like 7 times as hot as their wood stove. So as far as having a feeling of family or something, I didn't. I was desperately longing for a family. I knew what a family looked like because I'd seen other families. And even the religious family that I lived with, that was a family. They actually loved their kids. They loved me, but they scared the hell out of me too. So I wanted a family. My mother finally remarried, and the man she married had 2 kids, a girl and a boy, about my age, a little bit younger than me. All of a sudden I had a family, siblings, and even though we took care of ourselves, my mother and my stepfather had a bar restaurant, and they were busy all the time, so we 3 took care of each other. But if my mother got mad at my stepfather, she would order her stepchildren to be sent back to their mother. And I'd be left with this pain of losing my siblings. And I'd beg and cry, and I finally got my mother to let them come back and live with us again. So that went on, until I was an adult, really. Okay, this is the start. I had this wonderful nanny, an older lady that loved Aaron, and she lived in the apartment house with us. So Aaron spent a lot of time with her, and she would have tea with Aaron, but it was always with a different character. She would have tea with the pirate, or she would have tea with the Batman, or whatever it was. But he loved costumes, and give him a cape, and he was just. This is a Volkswagen that I bought because I had a kid then, and before that was all sports cars. Mm-hmm. But I ended up with a Volkswagen van. A knight in shiny plastic armor. He's a lion. It's hard to have tea with a lion, but it can be done.
Yeah, my name is Phil Gilbertson. I'm the retired provost of the university as of 2010, and I'm writing a comprehensive history of the University of the Pacific right now. Bill grew up in a very, very conventional 1950s white middle-class family. Very conservative. I remember him telling me that he was so offended that his father would make racial jokes, and he challenged his father on this all the time, and his father was gruff in his response to his son.
And he was, from what he said, an individual, and his father was
an alcoholic.
And his mother was no great shakes either.
Right.
And Bill pretty much raised himself.
So Bill didn't have a particularly happy family life. And of course, secretive about his sexual orientation with his family for years and years.
I was always afraid to tell my parents that I was gay, even though I really wanted to. By the time I was 17, I knew I was gay. I had a girlfriend before that in high school, and we were going to get married, the whole thing. And then one summer, I went away to a summer camp, and I fell in love with one of the counselors. He didn't touch me, and I didn't touch him. It wasn't that thing, but I fell in love with him. And I really wanted to tell my parents. I wanted to tell everybody, but I couldn't. I had to keep it quiet. So I sort of suffered in silence, and I went to Pacific the next year. And the whole time I was at Pacific, I was fighting my homosexuality.
University of Pacific in the 1950s was a very homogeneous, white middle-class campus, like so many private colleges across the country. There was no campus discourse about gay people, except in the sense that Bill most feared, which was that at the time, many people, probably most people, viewed homosexuality as an aberrant behavior, as a perversion, and so the term pervert, and Ferry used it derogatorily.
My name is Gail Pittman, and I'm a professor of psychology and women's studies at Sacramento City College. This doesn't get talked about probably like in most American history classes, but of course, history classes will talk about communism and talk about the 1950s and the Red Scare, but along the lines of the Red Scare was what a lot of queer scholars refer to as the Pink Scare, meaning that anybody who was considered to be gay, they didn't even have to be gay. If they were considered to be gay, they could be persecuted, they could be fired from their job, they could be, their life could be miserable in a variety of different ways.
Well, there was such a negative view of gay people that religion condemned it, condemned homosexuals. No church would be supportive of you, except one that I can think of that might. You were not seen as having the makings of being a good citizen. Every institution was negative towards gays. And so, I don't remember how you pitched that particular question, but there was nothing that was supporting in any way, but everything was geared to have to teach you negative feelings about yourself. So the field of psychology itself.
It was this self-hatred that we get. And I spent so many hours at Morris Chapel praying that I would change. And of course it didn't happen. So after I graduated from Pacific, I came to Sausalito. And I just happened, my first year there, I met some absolutely wonderful older people. I was 21 at the time, and I met somebody who was 42. Well, 42 to me seemed very, very old. But I like this fellow. He's very Anglophile, he's very dignified. And I said, gee, you're like the father I've always wanted. He loved that. And he started going around introducing me as his son. And so he was dad and I was his son. There was a straight woman that was in love with him. It was unrequited. But she wanted to be a part of this thing. And so she became the mother. And then there was a 65-year-old woman who was an artist in town, very well-known artist, Enid Foster. And she didn't have a family, so she became the grandmother. So now we had Dad, Muffer, and Grandma Witchcraft, and me. Well, we became a family in every regard. I mean, we took care of each other. We were constantly together. Everything that we did together. Like picnics and going to the theater and drinking. So that was my family. And then, of course, the logical next step is, where's the grandkid?
He felt the personal need to have his own family. And the saga of his journey to try to get to the point, this is in the 50s and early 60s, to get to the point of actually having his own child. I mean, my guess, he must have talked to dozens of people who said, Bill, you gotta be crazy. This just can't be done.
Well, to my knowledge, it wasn't something people consider. Now, that's a very early date you're talking about. It didn't become a rather popular thing to do till much later. And so I sure wasn't aware of anyone adopting a child.
As he first began exploring this, you know, and finding closed doors everywhere, finally heard that, that in Castro's Cuba, they were allowing single males to adopt children.
I took a bus to Veradero and walked down the beach to this palace, which was in ruins by that time. But it was run by some nuns, and they did have it was an orphanage. And I told them in my high school broken Spanish that I wanted to adopt a baby and take it back to the United States. And they practically kicked me out of the orphanage. They took a broom and started poking me and said, out, out, out. I guess they thought I was a pedophile or something, and so, you know, they wouldn't have anything to do with me. So I came back to the United States, came back to California, and there's an article in the Chronicle, and it says that in San Francisco, there are 850 children they cannot find homes for, and that they want the public to know that it's much easier now to adopt than it used to be.
If a person wants to adopt a child, it's an extensive, complex, complicated, long drawn out affair. They have to, first of all, they got to apply to be an adoptive parent. Then they have to fill out tons of forms. They have to give a family history. They've got to give a work history. They've got to give an education history. They've got to give medical history. They have to, I mean, we're screening these people to be perfect.
And so I wrote for the pamphlet, and I said, you may not want to send this to me, waste it on me, because I'm just a single man, even though I would love to be a daddy. Somebody phones me out of the blue a couple of days later, and they say, we would like you to come in and have a discussion. Well, first of all, they asked me how old I was. And at that time, I was like 37. And they said, well, we've been looking for somebody between 35 and 45. Would you come in, and we'd just like to talk to you about it. So I went in, and I had made an appointment with Dorothy Murphy, who was the head of the agency. What I didn't know was that before that, my meeting with her, there had been a big discussion within the agency, within the San Francisco Adoption Agency, about single adoptions. And they were divided. Half of them were adamantly against it. There should be a mother, a father, a dog, a cat, picket fence, station wagon. Else, you know, no go.
The biggest obstacle for a single person adopting, straight or gay, was everyone was looking for that dynamic, loving duo. That, as we called it, you're much younger than me, but in those days we called it the Ozzie and Harriet syndrome.
You know, the idea was that the man should be the breadwinner, that he go out, he make the money, He be the one that lays down the law at home. You know, he's the one who has the final say. You know, he's sort of that bastion of strength and of reliability and financial stability. And that was really seen as a sign of masculinity as well, you know, which is one thing that he can pass on to his children, particularly his male children. And that the woman was considered to be the nurturer and the caretaker and the guard of the home and the hearth and sort of the protector, if you will, as well as on passing on feminine characteristics to her daughters, assuming she had daughters. And that, at least at the time, the thinking was that if there was too weak of a fatherly presence or too strong of a motherly presence, that balance gets totally out of whack, and that was thought to have an impact on children.
I went in to see Dorothy Murphy. She felt that single people could make very good parents. And all of a sudden I began to realize this may be happening. This may be real. And I got scared. And so I gave her every reason she shouldn't let me have that kid. I'm still single. I still like to go out. But I'm poor, and I really want to put a child through college, you know. I'm working on these houses every day. I'm tearing things out and painting and sanding floors and everything. Get a babysitter. Poor people send their kids to school. Get a crib. Have the baby there with you. It'll be wonderful. You can work and take care of the baby at the same time. She had all these answers for me. And I was assigned a social worker. So I fixed up my house. Luckily, I was just coming to the end of restoration on a house on Bernal Heights, overlooking the city, beautiful brown shingle place. And I cleaned up that house within the inch of its life because my social worker was coming. Got all dressed up. The social worker rings the doorbell, and it's a black woman. She comes in, and I'm in love with her, and she's in love with me. It's just like, you know how sometimes you just meet somebody and it's wonderful. So we talk for a long time about discipline and education and religion and family and the whole thing about kids. All of a sudden she looks up at the ceiling. She's not looking at me. Before this, it's like she and I are just like riveting, looking at each other, looking into each other's souls. She looks up the ceiling and she says, you know, she said, we've never had a homosexual apply. You know, I think homosexuals would make very good parents, but most people don't think that. And unfortunately, I hope that if that ever happens, she said, I hope they don't tell me, because I would have to go back to the committee and then they would probably have to not make the placement. She said, and wouldn't that be tragic for some little kid not to get a home? That would be, I feel would be very good. So I got the idea. Just do it as a straight person, you know.
As far as gay people adopting, they just didn't do it. They did, as I said earlier in the interview, they did it surreptitiously. And really good, objective, caring, loving social workers would ignore the sexuality issue, but they would make sure that that didn't become a part of the known to the authorities, even administrators in an agency, private or public.
Before the gay liberation movement had really taken a stronghold, and before there was even really a cultural consciousness about gay people having children or parenting children, I mean, they were seen as a danger to children and a danger to society, and that in any way possible it should be quashed, it should be treated, it should be institutionalized, you know, that the issue needed to be silenced in some way because it was seen as that powerful. And I think the bottom line was the fear that if there is a gay man raising a child and that child is going to become gay themselves, and then, you know, you're passing on an unhealthy, quote unquote, family tradition.
I was interviewed then by Mary Davidson for 9 months. We met, I think, about once a month, but it was a thorough, you know, investigation of me. And we got to know each other very well. And finally, I got a letter saying that I had been okayed. And then they made the placement. I guess there's one more story I'd tell you, but I know I'm going to cry if I tell it, and I don't want to. Yeah. It's meeting Aaron for the first time. Oh, God, I don't know if I can.
You don't have to.
Oh, yeah, maybe we should wait for a while.
You don't have to.
Okay. They found Aaron, And the first time I saw him, he was very strange. He had been in a foster home for 2 years, and they had shaved his head because they didn't want to shampoo his hair or comb it. And he was put out in a crib out in the backyard with 5 other infants. Oh no, there were 4 other infants. There were 5 altogether. And so he was almost black from the sun. But he had these beautiful blue-gray eyes like Paul Newman. So I asked my social worker if I could be alone with him, because I wanted to see if there was any sort of a connection there. And we got into this room, and he just sort of looked around and said, la la gaga, la la gaga. So I went back to her and I said, you know, I hope you don't give up on me, but I don't think this little boy's for me. There was no connection whatsoever. And so she said, that's okay, that happens quite often. So the next day was his 2nd birthday, and I was painting an apartment and my brother was helping me, and my brother would say, you know, Bill, said, if children get enough love, you know, they change. And I said, no, it's not going to work. But, you know, I keep thinking about him. Oh, I'm going to start crying. I know it. So I went down to FAO Schwartz and I bought a teddy bear. And so I phoned, I phoned Dorothy up and said that I'd like to give this teddy bear to that little boy. I don't want to adopt him. I just want to give him a teddy bear for his birthday. And so she said, well, you know, these children know when they're being turned down. They're not dumb. They may be young, but they know that they're not being accepted. And I said, oh, I've worked with children all my life. I said, you know, I just want to give them a little present and go on my way. And I was telling Dorothy, I said, you know, I guess what I really expected was like Shirley Temple. And the doors would open, there would be a wonderful sunset, and Shirley Temple and I would go, you know, out the doors, and that would be it. I said, with this kid, it's just not that way. And the doors opened, he ran out, and he threw his arms around my legs. And I stood there like I'm doing right now, and I just spurted the tears out. I couldn't stop crying. So that was it. And it took me about 10 days to fix up a room for him in the nursery and everything. And they made the placement. And on the day they made the placement, my social worker came, she brings him to the door, and he's dressed in a sweater, a little shirt, some shorts, shoes, and holding a teddy bear that I gave him, and that was it. No other clothes, no food, nothing. And so she left and came back in a couple of hours and rang the doorbell again. She said, Bill, she said, I hate to tell you this. He said, but I want to keep you informed. Somebody at the agency has said that you are gay and that you're going to have an orgy in the nursery tonight. And she said, Dorothy and I know that you don't have time to organize an orgy. So I don't want you to worry about it. It's probably going to go away, but you should know what's happening. So for the next 9 months, which is a whole nother story, I fought this thing. I had to be tested by a psychiatrist. I wrote letters saying that I wasn't gay, which was a big lie. I went to the psychiatrist, and he asked me, he said, are you gay or straight? And I said, well, I opened up to him, and I said, I'm probably gay. But I said, that doesn't matter, does it? And we talked about parenting and things. And he wrote a very favorable report on me, saying that I would be responsible and trustworthy. So finally, it got worse and worse, though. I mean, the half of the agency that were against us in the first place really became adamant about it. And of course, they were afraid that some Catholic women's group would start picketing the agency. They were all terrified about this thing. And then they were terrified that it would get out that I'm gay. So they were in terrible conflict.
The biggest issue then was there was just such animosity toward homosexuals, and the reason was they thought, as I said earlier, they saw homosexuals as being disturbed mentally and emotionally and psychologically, and that they were unfit, and that they were deviant, and that they had molested children. Why would you place a child into the home of a single male, especially if that man is perceived as deviant and you perceive them as being child molesters? You were placing that child in a den of molestation? No, that's not going to happen. And that was some of the animosity, some of the hostility, some of the tremendously misguided understandings and misinterpretations that were going through the minds of the authorities at that time.
Homosexuality to a lot of people, even though early research had been done indicating that gay men were really no different in terms of their psychological adjustment to their straight counterparts. There was a classic study that was done in 1957 that showed that beautifully. But even with that study and then with some follow-up studies, there was still a really strong cultural belief system that being gay was sick and being gay was sinful, and it was catching. It was almost like it was seen as contagious. You know, if you're around it, especially if young, impressionable minds are around it, like your own children, it might get absorbed. And that's the last thing, at least at that particular time within the cultural consciousness, that people wanted to have absorbed by children. It was seen as really damaging.
Finally, I just happened to meet a gay lawyer by the name of Evander Smith. And I told him my story, and without charging me a penny, he wrote like a 4-page letter to the agency threatening to sue everybody, from my social worker right on up to the governor, if they didn't provide proof in 2 weeks that I was an unfit parent. Of course, they couldn't provide any proof like that. All the time that for that 9 months that Aaron was with me, we saw social workers, and they knew how I was living and everything. There was no proof that I was an unfit parent. And because they were afraid of being sued, they closed the deal. And I became the first single parent. It became finalized February 13th, 1969. And on Father's Day of that year, the Chronicle printed a feature story about it. And that's what went all over the world, that story.
He became an important part in history of adoption, because it became known that he was the first man to adopt a child and was out and openly gay. He ended up on the Phil Donahue show, who was a liberal type commentator.
You don't like it at all. What's wrong with it?
Why? Morally, it's not right.
Because they're gay.
Not enough to raise children with a husband and a wife. And
Because they're gay, they should not be able to raise children or be foster parents or adopt.
Right.
Gays who raise children will raise gay children.
I'm very anxious
I think there's a possibility.
Very anxious.
Hang on just a second. I bet you are.
Probably wait.
Let me just tell you who's here. You are Bill Jones.
Right.
Here he was, becoming nationally famous. And wasn't nervous, didn't bother him, wasn't, oh my gosh, this is really big. It was just Bill. Larger than life.
Men want to be parents as much as women want to be parents.
Bill was emboldened in his identity, in his convictions, in his sense of social justice, that he was proud to go public with this, even though there was risk.
The time that I didn't have any support from my friends was sort of crucial. I started getting letters from some of my friends saying they were wondering if this was the right thing to do, and was it really moral for a gay person to adopt a child, and they were really holding back their support. And my best friend, Bill Pasick, decided to give me a baby shower in June. And everybody was invited. A couple of days before the baby shower, I think the baby shower was on Sunday, I think it was like a Friday night, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. And we were all, in complete despair over that. And so Bill took down all the decorations, the fun decorations, and just had flowers. But we were still going to have this baby shower. So as my friends came up the stairs, and I could see their faces like, what in the hell have you done now? Well, Aaron was so cute. He was absolutely darling. And they started playing with him and tossing him through the air from one to the other like a football. I mean, he was squealing with delight. Everybody was having a good time. And then I got up and made my little speech. And I said, there are several ways of assassination. You can kill somebody, but you can also kill a dream by not letting somebody fulfill what they think they'd really like to do, something that's positive. And I think that got over to a lot of them. And by the time I got through, there were a lot of tears, and there was a lot of warmth, for my friends. It was great. I'd forgotten about it. Friends have always been my family. I mean, ever since I got out of school. Actually, going back even during school, I think. Because I was denied a real family, my friends just mean the world to me.
I guess one of the interesting things about Bill's whole story is how tragic, really, then his role as a parent became. He knew early on that young Aaron had some problems. His birth mother was a heroin addict, and as he soon found out, as Bill needed the special care in schools and so on, that he was one of the early crack babies, as we called them at the time, and since then.
The child was born addicted to drugs, heroin, whatever it was, and he was 2 years old, I think, when Bill was able to get him, adopt him, and he'd already been rejected by five different potential families, Aaron, because of he's one of those babies that had problems.
Difficulties we had finding homes for a lot of our foster youth was the fact that if they had alcohol fetal syndrome, they were hard to place. If they had disabilities, they were difficult to place. If they had behavioral problems, they were hard to place. People wanted the ideal child, and our children weren't ideal.
Bill loved being a parent, and he was such a good parent. It's so obvious when he talks about it. And Aaron just flowered under his parenting. But he also struggled because he had learning disabilities and behavior issues, and by the time he was a teenager, he got involved with other students with drugs. Bill, ever loving of Aaron and always seeking his good, did all he could. Private schools, special counseling, training, rehab, you name it. I think he did everything he could for Aaron. But by the time Aaron was into his young adulthood, in his 20s, he was a serious drug addict and died of drug overdose at age 30. The apple of his eye that he lost, that he worked so hard to gain from the start, and then to lose him like that was a very painful experience for Bill.
But this is something that I thought that he would really love to have, you know, when he got older. This is his little Lord Fauntleroy's romper suit. And I've kept it. This is a wonderful quilt that somebody made for him. His hat. His bib. This is from Philadelphia when we were on the Mike Douglas show. This is the plate that he drew and we had baked, whatever they call it. These were his plates when he was a little baby. This is one of his costumes, a little cowboy outfit.
Oh, those
my gosh.
costumes.
Oh. Well, these are the clothes that he was wearing when he died. I forgot to put those in. And here are little things that he wore when he was a baby.
This one?
Yeah, that one. I'll show you. There's the tree I planted for him.
This one right in front.
Yeah. There was a brick wall that went around it and a plaque on it. It was dedicated to Aaron Hunter Jones, the first child to be adopted by a single man.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody tore it down, one of the owners.
Mm. And it's grown ever since.
Bill, as Henry already mentioned, is a self-made fellow. He pulled himself by his own bootstraps up. I don't think he got much of that from his own family, who were brawling and drinking and disorienting for any growing child. And Bill grew up remarkably intact considering what his background was. I think it's a tribute to a strong personality.
It would seem to me that many people growing up in that environment, given who he was, that's what he would have set aside. I don't need family. I don't need family. Instead, Bill redefines family. Redefines family.
Honestly, to me, that's amazing. I mean, given the time period, it's almost unbelievable to think about, because at that time period, I mean, again, you know, people were thrown into mental institutions and people were arrested. So really, I mean, the fact in that context, in that time period, that, you know, that the adoption prevailed and that he was able to not only adopt this child as a single parent, but as a gay male single parent is staggering. Especially given the fact that today in a number of states around the United States, that's still an impossibility. There's still laws on the books in a number of states that prevent gay people, gay men or lesbian women, from adopting children, period.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking, like, somebody's doing a documentary of me, for God's sakes. It's like I actually did something. All I wanted to do was to adopt a child. And it just happened that I'm the first one to ever adopt.
Today, people have, through various movements, through the civil rights movement, particularly the women's rights movement, the gay rights movement, people have decided that I'm not going to walk to your drum. I'm going to walk to mine. And I will live my life as I see fit based on the principles and values I hold. And I will also raise my family as I see fit. It may be with a man. It might be with a woman. It might not be with either one. I might prefer just to be a single parent on my own, taking care of my child or children. And that's the way things have evolved over the past 70 years. I mean, but most especially since the 70s.